Hey everyone, seems like we're diving into fuel cell electric vehicles today, FCEVs, as I'm sure you already know.
That's right.
And we've got some intriguing research papers you sent our way. Let's see, we have fuel cell-based electric vehicles, technologies and challenges. Always a mouthful from environmental science and pollution research, right?
Yes, and the other one is hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, opportunities and challenges.
Okay, from sustainability. So, ready to take a deep dive into the world of FCEVs.
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
Perfect. Now, imagine for a second we're at, I don't know, a tech conference, right? And someone sees my I Heart FCEVs button and asks, so what's the big deal with FCEVs anyway? What's our, 30-second explainer, our elevator pitch?
Well, you could say that FCEVs are basically electric vehicles, but instead of batteries, they run on a chemical reaction.
A chemical reaction on the go?
Yeah. So you've got hydrogen from the car's tank and oxygen just from the air. They
Okay.
get together inside the fuel cell, react, and boom, you've got electricity to power the motor.
And that's it, just electricity.
And water. The only byproduct is pure H2O.
So it's like eco-friendly and efficient.
Exactly.
Now, that's what I call a clean getaway. Actually,
Right.
speaking of clean, the research paper, I think it was a key fuel cell-based electric vehicles one, mentioned different colors of hydrogen. What's that all about? It sounds like a pack of highlighters got loose in the lab.
It's not quite as colorful as it sounds, but it's definitely important.
Okay, so what are we talking about here? Like Hydrogen Fashion Week.
Not quite. See, the way we produce hydrogen determines its environmental impact. Right now, the most common type is what they call gray hydrogen, which unfortunately relies heavily on fossil fuels.
Not so green then.
Not really, no.
Yeah.
Then there's blue hydrogen, which is a bit better because it captures those carbon emissions during production.
So still using fossil fuels, but cleaning up after itself a bit.
Exactly. But the holy grail, the one everyone's aiming for, is green hydrogen. That's made using renewable energy sources like wind or solar power.
So that's the truly clean hydrogen.
That's the one. That's what makes FCEVs truly zero emission.
Got it. Green hydrogen, that's the goal. But in the meantime, are there actually any FCEVs on the road today? Or is this all still, futuristic concept car stuff?
Well, you might be surprised to hear this, but there are actually several FCEV models available commercially right now.
Wait, really? I hadn't heard that.
Yeah. Toyota has the Mirai. Hyundai has the Nexo, both mentioned in the Opportunities and Challenges paper, actually.
Right.
Honda's got the Clarity fuel cell, and even Mercedes-Benz has thrown their hat in the ring.
Wow, so the big players are taking it seriously.
They are. And it's interesting. South Korea is way ahead of the curve in terms of actually having FCEVs on the road.
Huh. I wonder what they're doing right over there.
Definitely something to look into.
Yeah, we might need to do a whole other deep dive on that, actually.
Yeah.
But for now, let's stick with the cars themselves. What are we talking about in terms of, the pros and cons, the good, the bad, the ugly, or maybe not ugly, but you know what I mean? Yeah, I get you. Well, on the plus side, you've got those zero emissions we talked about, especially with green hydrogen. Plus, the range is comparable to gasoline cars. One of the papers mentioned a range of 500 kilometers.
Wow, 500 kilometers on a single tank. That's pretty impressive.
It is, right. And refueling is way faster than battery EVs. We're talking minutes at a hydrogen station versus hours plugged in.
Okay, that is a serious advantage. But there's got to be a downside, right? What's the catch?
Well, the biggest hurdle right now is infrastructure, or the lack thereof, finding a hydrogen station. It's not as easy as finding a gas station, that's for sure.
Yeah, I imagine it's like trying to find a unicorn at a petting zoo.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And storing hydrogen is another challenge. It needs to be kept under high pressure, which adds complexity and cost.
And of course, there's the whole issue of making sure that hydrogen is actually green, right?
You got it. That's a big one. Green hydrogen production is still more expensive, so there's work to do there.
So it's kind of like we're in the early adopter phase, like with the first smartphones or something.
Yeah.
That's a good analogy. But with those challenges in mind, it begs the question, why are researchers and car companies still so gung-ho about FCEVs? What am I missing here?
That's a great question, and it's something both of these research papers really try to address, because despite those hurdles, FCEVs have some pretty unique advantages over battery electric vehicles.
Okay, I'm listening. Convince me.
Well, for one, there's that range and refueling time we talked about, a major plus for things like long-haul trucking or shipping. Imagine, no more range anxiety for those long journeys. FCEVs could be a real game changer for those industries.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. And I guess with trucks, weight is a big factor too, right?
You got it. Batteries are heavy, which impacts their efficiency, especially for large vehicles. Hydrogen, even stored under pressure, is way lighter than a comparable battery pack. Okay, that makes sense. So we're talking lighter vehicles, longer range, faster refueling. Sounds pretty good on paper. But I know from reading these research papers, especially that fuel cell-based electric vehicle one, that there are some speed bumps along the way, right?
Yeah, there are some technical challenges. One of the things they dive into is the issue of slow power response.
Slow power response. Okay, now you're just using big words to intimidate me. What does that even mean?
Basically, it means fuel cells don't deliver power as quickly as a battery can.
Oh, so it's about how fast the car can accelerate.
Exactly. Think about merging onto a highway. You need that instant burst of power. With a fuel cell, there might be a slight lag.
Like a slight hesitation.
Yeah, a bit. Not a deal breaker, but definitely something engineers are working to improve.
So it's like that lag you sometimes get with turbocharged engines, but for hydrogen cars.
That's a great way to put it. And just like with turbo lag, there are solutions in the works. The article talks about using things called supercapacitors. They're like tiny, super fast batteries that provide a quick energy boost when needed.
Supercapacitors, huh? Sounds a bit like something out of a sci-fi movie. So they act like a backup power boost.
You got it.
Clever. But I bet managing all that, making it all work together seamlessly, that can't be easy.
You're right about that. That fuel cell-based electric vehicles research really gets into the nitty-gritty.
Bring on the nitty-gritty. I'm ready for part 2.
It's all about power electronics and control systems, making sure the power delivery is smooth and responsive. No one wants a laggy car.
Right. Got to have that instant torque. But even with all that tech, even if they get the performance right, there's still the cost issue, right?
Yeah.
And hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, opportunities and challenges did not hold back on that front.
Yeah, FCEVs are still a lot pricier to make than your average gas guzzler, that's for sure, and even more than battery EVs at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I get that new tech always comes at a premium, but are we talking like early adopter premium or something more fundamental here?
Yeah.
Because those numbers they mentioned, that cost gap of 8 to 30 euros per kilogram of hydrogen, yikes.
It's a significant gap, no doubt. But the research does point to some potential cost-saving avenues.
Okay, like what? Give me some hope here.
Well, for one, there's the good old economies of scale. The more FCEVs we produce, the cheaper each one gets, theoretically.
Right. Basic supply and demand, pump up those numbers, bring down the price.
Exactly. But it's not just about turning them out. There's also a lot of research going into making the fuel cells themselves cheaper to produce, new materials, better manufacturing processes, that sort of thing.
So it's a two-pronged approach.
Right.
Make more of them and make them better.
Precisely. And let's not forget the power of government incentives. A lot of countries are already offering subsidies and tax breaks for electric vehicles, FCEVs included.
Right, trying to sweeten the deal a little.
Exactly. As the push for cleaner transportation gets stronger, those incentives could become even more significant, make FCEVs a more attractive option for everyday buyers.
It's wild how something like cars, which feels so, I don't know, individual, are actually caught up in this web of economics, government policy, cutting-edge science. It's kind of mind-boggling.
It's a complex system for sure.
So, with all that in mind, what's the researchers' overall take on the future of FCEVs? Are they optimistic?
Yeah.
Skeptical? Somewhere in between?
I'd say both research papers acknowledge the challenges FCEVs face, especially going head-to-head with battery electric vehicles in the short term.
Right, it's a tough battle to win.
It is. But they also seem to agree that FCEVs could really carve out their own niche in the long run, especially for those applications where those advantages we talked about, the fast refueling, long range, lighter weight, those are really crucial.
So maybe not your average commuter car, but more for things like, we said, heavy-duty trucking, shipping, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's about using the right tool for the job.
You're
right.
stumped.
And who knows, maybe as the technology develops, we'll find even more uses for them.
It's true. We're always discovering new applications for tech.
Mm-hmm.
Now, something else that caught my eye in the Opportunities and Challenges paper was this idea of, what do they call it? Cross-sector collaboration. What's the thinking there?
Ah, yes. Well, that gets to the heart of one of the biggest hurdles for FCEVs right now, the lack of infrastructure. It's that classic chicken and egg problem, right?
People aren't going to buy FCEVs if there's nowhere to refuel them, but companies aren't going to build hydrogen stations if there aren't enough FCEVs on the road. It's a tough nut to crack.
Exactly. And that's where collaboration comes in. We're starting to see car companies teaming up with energy companies, governments, even research institutions to figure out this whole infrastructure thing together.
So instead of everyone working in their own silos, it's more like, hey, let's pool our resources and figure this out.
Precisely. Imagine oil and gas companies, they've got the know-how when it comes to pipelines, distribution networks. Maybe they can leverage that expertise to help transport and deliver hydrogen.
It's like repurposing that existing gas station model, but for hydrogen.
Exactly. And governments can offer funding, incentives, really help jumpstart the whole process.
So a lot of moving parts, a lot of players. Sounds like it's going to take a real team effort to get this hydrogen highway up and running.
It will, but I think that's the key takeaway here. It's a shared responsibility.
We're all in this together, right?
Exactly.
Now, all this talk about refueling stations makes me wonder about the other side of the equation, the hydrogen itself. We touched on those different colors of hydrogen, gray, blue, green, and how important it is to get to green hydrogen for FCEVs to truly be a green solution. But is there even enough green hydrogen being produced right now to support a large-scale shift to FCEVs?
That's the billion-dollar question, isn't it? Right now, most hydrogen production still relies on fossil fuels. That's the gray hydrogen. But the good news is that green hydrogen production, using renewable energy to split water into hydrogen and oxygen, that's ramping up.
So we're talking wind farms, solar panels, that sort of thing, powering the creation of hydrogen
Yeah,
fuel.
exactly. And as renewable energy gets cheaper, green hydrogen is becoming more cost competitive.
Still a ways to go, but it's moving in the right direction.
Hmm.
But even if we can produce enough green hydrogen, how do we move it around? Store it? Isn't hydrogen, like, notoriously difficult to wrangle?
It's not without its challenges, that's for sure. Hydrogen is a gas, so storage requires large volumes.
So we're talking what? Specialized tankers, pipelines, storage facilities, that sort of thing. Sounds like a logistical nightmare.
It's a big task, no doubt, but a lot of smart people are working on it, developing new materials for lighter, more compact hydrogen tanks, looking at cryogenic technologies to store hydrogen in liquid form, even experimenting with ways to, trap hydrogen within solid materials.
Wait, trap hydrogen in solid materials? How does that even work?
It's pretty wild. They're called metal hydrides. Basically, certain metals can absorb hydrogen like a sponge absorbs water.
Whoa, that's incredible. So the hydrogen is just, like, hanging out in the metal until you need it.
Exactly. It's like a hydrogen battery almost.
That's amazing. So much cool science going on behind the scenes. It's easy to forget that when you just see the car itself.
Exactly. There's a whole hidden world of research and development going on to make FCEVs a reality. And it's not just about storage and delivery. There are also some really interesting advancements happening in FCEV design itself.
Like what? Were we talking flying cars yet?
Not quite flying cars, but they are working on making fuel cells more efficient, longer lasting. They're experimenting with new materials, things like, what are they called? Proton exchange membranes.
Proton exchange membranes. Sounds complicated.
It is, but basically, these membranes are key to how the fuel cell works. They help conduct the protons, which are those tiny particles that carry the electrical charge.
So better membranes, better fuel cell performance.
Exactly. And they're also working on making those hydrogen tanks even smaller and lighter, which means more space for passengers and cargo.
So FCEVs of the future, potentially roomier and more practical.
Potentially, yeah. And who knows, maybe one day they'll even be stylish.
Well, there's always room for improvement there. I'm picturing those early cell phones, those big clunky things. Remember those?
Oh, yeah. FCEVs are kind of in that phase now, design-wise. But just like cell phones evolved into those sleek, pocket-sized devices we have today, who's to say FCEVs won't do the same?
True, true. It's exciting to think about the possibilities. But it also makes you wonder, with all this effort, all this research and development, are FCEVs really the silver bullet solution for our transportation woes? I mean, are they going to solve climate change and our dependence on fossil fuels, all that?
If only were that simple. The research is clear that FCEVs are not a magic solution.
No one thing ever is, right?
Exactly. They have their strengths, but also limitations. The future of transportation is likely going to involve a mix of different technologies all working together.
So it's not about picking a winner, but about recognizing that different technologies can play different roles.
Exactly. Battery electric vehicles, fuel cell electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, even biofuels, they all have a part to play in reducing emissions. And we can't forget about things like public transport, cycling infrastructure, making cities more walkable, reducing our reliance on cars altogether.
Like that saying, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey, right?
Well, in this case, it's about both. We need to think about the destination, a cleaner, more sustainable transportation system, but also about the journey, the different paths we can take to get there.
I like that. It's about being open to different solutions, different possibilities.
Mm.
Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into the world of FCEVs, I'm curious to hear your take on all of this. After digging into this research, do you feel optimistic about the future of FCEVs?
I'd say I'm cautiously optimistic. There are definitely challenges, no doubt about it, but I do think FCEVs have the potential to play a significant role in the future of transportation, especially as that hydrogen economy develops and green hydrogen becomes more readily available.
It's a long game, but a worthwhile one.
I think so. The research really paints a picture of FCEVs as a crucial piece of the puzzle in creating a cleaner, more sustainable, and, dare I say, even more efficient transportation future.
A hopeful thought to end on. But before we close the book on these research articles, I want to leave our listeners with something to ponder, a question that might spark some further exploration. We've been talking about FCEVs mostly as replacements for the cars we drive every day, but what if that's not really their destiny?
Hmm. Interesting thought.
Like, what if their real potential is in those areas where battery EVs might not be the best fit, like that heavy-duty trucking we talked about, or even like cargo ships, things like that?
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Could FCEVs be the key to making those industries, which are, let's face it, not exactly known for being eco-friendly right now,
Ah.
could FCEVs be the key to making them truly sustainable?
That's a really interesting perspective, and it makes you realize how much we tend to think about these things through the lens of our own experience. We all drive cars, so we picture FCEVs as cars, but their biggest impact might be somewhere else entirely.
It's like we're so focused on winning the electric car race, we haven't even thought about where else that road might lead.
Exactly. There's a whole world of possibilities out there.
Well, on that note, I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We've gone from the nitty-gritty science behind fuel cells to the very real challenges they face, but also the incredible opportunities they offer.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
It really has. And I think the biggest takeaway for me is that FCEVs, they're not just some futuristic fantasy, they're a technology with real potential to change how we think about transportation, maybe even change the world.
I completely agree. And whether they end up being the dominant force in transportation or they find their place as one important piece of a larger puzzle, it's clear that the journey towards a cleaner, greener, more efficient way to get around, that journey has already begun.
And FCEVs are along for the ride.
Absolutely.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of fuel cell electric vehicles. Hopefully, we've given you a clearer picture of this fascinating technology, its potential impact on the future, and maybe even spark some new ideas and questions along the way.
Always a pleasure to delve into these topics with you.
Likewise. And to our listeners, until next time, keep those engines revving and those minds exploring. You never know what groundbreaking innovations might be just around the corner.